remember the good old days back in 2021 when I was young and naive and I thought that the likes of Meghan Markle were actually intelligent, witty, smart, cunning people who schemed everything and didn't do anything on an impulse. Yeah, suffice to say that those days are long gone by now, and I have since grown wiser to the machinations, or lack thereof, of one Meghan Markle. Raise your hand. Yes, I know I can't see you do it, but I'll hear your opinions in the comments. If you believe that MEGXIT was always planned from the beginning. So Meghan intentionally infiltrated or joined the royal family just to leave it, just to elevate herself and go back to Hollywood. Now raise your hand if you believe that it was just an impulsive hissy fit when no one proclaimed her queen, and specifically when the palace refused to protect her, to shut down freedom of the press, basically. There is a third option that I do not entertain personally because I just find it completely unsubstantiated, which is that Meghan was effectively kicked out of not only the royal family, but the UK, and that she's only allowed back in through invitations, such as for the Queen's funeral. Now, look, I can already bust a huge hole in that theory because she was in the UK for the One Young World Summit back in 2022, only a few days before the Queen passed. So I think we can lay that theory down to rest. Of course, she's not banned from the UK. She's allowed in. She just doesn't want to go where she's not wanted. So I have a video in the pipeline, more of a historical video, and I'm working on that. So I thought in the meantime, rather than leave the channel, full of dust and crickets and not upload, I'd put up this quick pros and cons analysis of whether Meghan planned MEGXIT from the beginning or whether it was a result of an impulsive hissy fit, but more importantly, a result of the Queen calling out their bluff. If there is one consensus, it is that Meghan Markle most definitely planned meeting Harry. That was in no way, a set up random blind date. It was in no way just serendipity.
Was he nice?
It was meticulously planned. We talked about how at length, but basically in summary, my theory is that back in 2015, when she was asked by a reporter to choose between William and Harry, and she picked Harry, very nonchalantly in her defense.
Prince William or Prince Harry? I don't know. Harry. Harry? Sure.
That was the moment that the possibility of meeting Harry and being with Harry was planted in her mind. So that interviewer was an inadvertent matchmaker. It's just my theory, in my opinion. Some people say it was a lot sooner, and you may be right. But basically, there was a point in time between 2014 and 2015 when she set her laser sights on Harry and decided to remold herself into a humanitarian to attract his attention. She saw that that was what he was into, that was his forte. And lo and behold, she was at the altar getting married. So good for her, that plan definitely succeeded. So based on the success of this plan, one could argue that she is a calculated schemer who thinks midterm at most, because I don't believe she is capable of long-term planning. So midterm, seeing as it didn't really take her that long to nail the prince, but also let's not forget that Prince Harry was an easy mark. And these types of people, whether man or woman, these predatory types, people who use people, they seek out easy targets to use and abuse or discard, they have a feel, it's almost reptilian, they have a sense for who's gonna fall for their BS. And so even the most unintelligent person who is predatory in that way can successfully land their prey as long as the prey is an easy mark, which we all know Prince Harry is the epitome of an easy mark. Remember the stories of Harry and Meghan meeting Oprah before the wedding, or maybe it was at the time of the wedding back in May of 2018, to discuss future projects? that could lean into the whole, this was all planned from the beginning and their bombshell interview was planned from the beginning, or at least they were going to do something with Oprah, something that would see them branching out of the royal family from the very beginning. Now, again, I could poke a hole in this argument, which is that they just foresaw themselves as royals who were modernizing the monarchy and who would also do Oprah specials or whatever they had in mind. So it didn't necessarily mean they were planning on quitting as full-time senior working royals. They probably thought that they could do it at the same time. Wasn't it in 1969 that at Prince Philip's behest, the cameras were introduced into the so-called private lives of the royal family at the time? And Queen Elizabeth notoriously hated that. But basically it was almost the first reality show, so to speak. So there is some sort of precedent for it. I'm not saying that it would have been exactly the same thing, but I'm looking at it from Meghan and Harry's point of view. It's like, oh, see, your grandfather did it, Harry. Why can't we? A lot of people say, based on the guest list, over 200 A-list celebrities whom she didn't even know personally were invited. Meanwhile, her mother was literally the only family member from her side present. That raised a lot of eyebrows, including my own, and it got a lot of people talking about whether she was using this as a networking event, basically. Now, you could say that there is stock in this argument, which is why I've put it forth, but the flip side is, we all know Meghan to be a grandiose narcissist. And not only is she a grandiose narcissist, but she's always craved the attention and the company of these Hollywood A-listers. So maybe we're reading too much into it, and it was just what it looked like at face value, which is her trying to live out her lifelong fantasy of being not only a princess, but the most important person in a room, or chapel rather, full of the people whom she coveted the most. And what are we at now? Number 4, number 5? I've lost count. But the next pro-MEGXIT argument is they're securing a Netflix and Spotify contract pretty quickly, all things considered. By the end of December of 2020, both deals were announced. And I'm sure that they signed the contract, they signed the dotted line months before the announcement. And so again, you can use that as an argument that supports the long-term planning that could have been involved with MEGXIT. However, again, you know what I'm gonna do, gonna be the lawyer and give you the flip side, be devil's advocate and say, they were such a hot commodity at the time, let's face it, as much as a lot of people had already seen through them by then. Not myself, by the way. The Oprah interview was my, I didn't even care, to be honest, but the Oprah interview was my whoa moment. Like, there's something up with this woman. But I digress. It could have been that they were so popular that Spotify and Netflix and everyone really were just clamoring for the chance to work with them. And when I say them, it's the royal allure, not Meghan Markle on her own, and she knew it. That's why we saw her sitting alongside Harry when the Spotify deal was announced, and they were talking about, giving the voiceless a voice, when in the end it was just archetypes, just her without her husband. She knew Harry was her ticket and her in to these big multi-million-dollar contracts, because that's the allure, royalty. Another tidbit that I learned through Tom Bower's book, Revenge, is that Meghan put basically all of her clothing, all her belongings in storage in Canada, and she never sent them off to the UK. Now, it could be that this was because she knew that she was going to be going back across the pond and she would want easy access to these belongings. But the flip side of that, or the devil's advocate argument, is that she may have basically discarded those clothes, seeing them as beneath her. It's not really out of character for her. She went into the royal family expecting a brand new designer multi-million-dollar wardrobe, which is in fact what ended up happening. At one point, she had spent the most money out of all the European royals in 2018 on her wardrobe. And I say this because she's done it before. I believe, just from memory, when she scored suits and when she knew she was gonna, start getting the big bucks, she held this kind of Zara giveaway party in her house, giving away all her Zara pieces to friends, because now she can afford the better stuff, the Veronica Beards and whatever else she likes to wear. So it's not out of character for Meghan to just discard things that she sees as beneath her because she's moving on to better things. Another pro-Megxit argument is that she kept in contact with basically her entire North American team. She kept in contact with Sunshine Sachs, she kept in contact with her American lawyers and her American business managers. You could argue, why on earth would she do that if she was fully intending on settling down in her new home, the UK, as a newly minted royal duchess? And that point, yeah, I don't really have a counter to that. Let me know if you can come up with something in the comments, because that one's a pretty strong one, pro-Megxit. Wait, I did come up with one. Maybe she thought that she could, again, in her own delusions, in her own version of what it means to be a royal duchess who's modernizing the family, she thought she could have her own team to do the PR in America, to feed them stories and make sure that, you know, she's all the rage across the pond as well. Because we all know she cares a lot about what Hollywood thinks of her. The final pro-Megxit argument I could come up with, and I'm sure I'm going to come up with 10 more by the time I'm editing this. We all know Meghan to be quite simple-minded. And what I mean by that is she's very shallow, very frivolous. There's no depth to her. And what's been crystal clear from the very beginning with her is that she's always conflated royalty with celebrity. She never understood the distinction between the two, and there is a huge distinction. She's always coveted being a Hollywood A-lister. It's been her lifelong dream. And when she overshot that, she literally overshot that and became a royal duchess. You know, joining a royal family is the elite of the elite of the elite. It's what Hollywood A-listers dream of themselves. And yet, she could never see that. And so when you consider things from that perspective, it does kind of make sense, or give some sense to an otherwise nonsensical train of thought, ditching royalty for Hollywood, in the sense that to her, Hollywood was always the golden prize. And royalty, as crazy as it is even saying this out loud, was a way, a mechanism to get to Hollywood. It's a very roundabout way of trying to get to Hollywood, seeing as she was, you know, not necessarily in Hollywood, but within the industry at least. So it doesn't make sense to me, and I'm sure it doesn't make sense to a lot of you out there, possibly all of you, because it's nonsensical. But since when was Meghan a sensible person who made sense? Now for the arguments against. First of all, she shut down the TIG, which she has called time and time again in the past her baby, her little project that she slaved over.
It's my baby, so I'm very proud of it still after 2 years.
Watch a recent video, it's not recent anymore, who am I kidding? I think I made it back in March or April, where I talk about who I think was actually behind the TIG's success. If you haven't seen it already, hint, hint, it's a man, which seems to be a common thing in Meghan's life. But that argument aside, she likes to pretend it was her project, her baby, etc., and she worked hard on building it up. So you could argue the fact that she shut it down was proof that she really meant to relocate to the UK and move on from that life and settle down as, I shouldn't say settle down because Meghan never settles down, but basically embrace her new role as a royal duchess. A counter argument to that, you could say she shut it down, but that doesn't mean she intended on permanently moving away from it. We know that she, a few years ago, renewed the trademark or something in connection to the TIG, and so she still had the possibility of reigniting it, which she is now under the guise of American Riviera Orchard, which is relevant to a point further down in the list, so just hang in there, because American Riviera Orchard is proof, or very strong evidence I should say, that Meghan can't plan anything, and it's all pure impulse. Point number 2, she brought her favorite dog with her, the small one, Guy. We all know how she abandoned Bogart, claiming he was too old when he was, what, only 4 years old? Or 5 at most? I've never owned a dog. I'm more of a cat person. I love dogs. But I'm fairly certain that 5 years old is nowhere near old. It's just an adult dog. So yeah, we saw through that one, but she brought one of her dogs over. Now, you could again argue that that's not really a big deal. People travel with their dogs all the time back and forth. And he did, in fact, go back to the US with her. So, not the strongest argument, but it's there. The next argument against a pre-planned Megxit is the fact that the Queen offered them, ironically, the life that they claimed to want when they announced on Instagram their intentions to step back and be financially independent. If you'll remember, the Queen actually gave Meghan the option of marrying Harry and living as private citizens where she could continue her acting career, which, look, we all know was going nowhere. Hollywood is viciously ageist. Meghan's not talented. It was the end, and she knew it. But the Queen gave her the option nonetheless. And it didn't have to be limited to acting. People keep saying that, oh, the TIG was so successful. She didn't have to shut it down. She could have kept growing it as a business. There are many websites that do very well, which are along the same vein. In fact, the website that I believe the TIG was entirely modeled after, the Coveteur, is an example of how she could have made that an incredibly prosperous business. But she chose not to. Now, you could argue that that's because she needed the titles. It was a gift conferred upon them by the Queen, and I don't believe there are any restrictions or conditions that are attached to a monarch's gift, as in they didn't have to be working royals to earn that gift. It's a gift after all. There's no consideration in exchange for a gift. So they could have been the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, potentially, I'm theorizing here, while also living a financially independent life, potentially in the US. So it's very strange that they ended up demanding, I mean, they wanted half in, half out, to be fair, but they stressed the financially independent part of it. And it's funny that they pursued the very thing that the Queen offered them to begin with. So that to me leans heavily towards Megxit not being planned and it being the result of an impulsive hissy fit. The next point is that she's really too simple-minded and myopic. Her view is very limited. She doesn't think long-term. I was guilty, in fact, of believing throughout 2021, I'm not gonna lie, that this woman was an intelligent, cunning creature who didn't do or say anything without calculating every single step along the way. But time has shown me that I was incredibly wrong about that. And as such, it's really difficult to reconcile her mindset and her atrocious ability or lack of ability really to plan, execute, and succeed. Remember, Harry was an easy mark. We're gonna have to remove him from that. But every other thing she has set her eyes on, including her career, the stint at the embassy in Argentina, everything was a failure. Meghan doesn't have the capability to commit, to put in the effort. And ironically, that whole stick-to-itiveness she loved to talk about, back in her pre-Harry days, of not giving it 5 minutes if you can't give it 5 years. She's incapable of doing that. And she's proved that to us by barely lasting in the royal family. So why would she put her head down and think out Megxit so meticulously years in advance when she's incapable of doing it in any other scenario? Do you get what I'm trying to say? Another really important argument against pre-planned Megxit. She is incredibly impulsive, which is again something I used to argue against 3 years ago. I used to think that unlike Amber Heard, who was obviously very impulsive, because a lot of people compared Amber to Meghan. In fact, that's what really got me talking about her, because I was talking about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and then people were telling me, you need to look into Meghan Markle, because she is exactly like Amber, or rather they're cut from the same cloth. And so I used to argue against that, but again, time has shown me that, my goodness, is she impulsive. That's why everything is imploding in her face. Nothing is thought out. Look at the disastrous premature launch, if you can call it non-launch, of American Racism Orchestra. She launched the weird Instagram story back in March, was it? Really early in the year, I remember. And it was all because Prince William, and ironically her own husband, Prince Harry, were at an event that I believe from memory was to commemorate their mother in some way. And she just had to compete. She had to put herself in the headlines, especially with everyone concerned about Princess Catherine and her health, by putting out that nonsensical video of her looking like she's playing dress up in her parents' large mansion. Or even better, you know those influencers who rent out mansions and dress up and pretend it's theirs, but it's not really theirs? That's what it looked like. It's been over 6 months since that little non-launch even happened. Her Instagram followers are depleting by the day. She has posted nothing. The website is still not live. It's not functioning. There's no newsletter. There's no mailing list. There's nothing. Not to mention that her trademark application failed, just like it did with archetypes. You know, she keeps announcing these projects and claiming these names without even registering a trademark successfully prior to that. Those are all rookie mistakes that small business owners are successfully managing without a whole team behind them. We're approaching Christmas and it doesn't look like American Racism Orchestra is gonna have any products to sell. You know, what happened to all that jam? Why isn't that on sale already? Or was that just another ploy to make the headlines? Another impulsive act to overshadow. Remember how she released jam and dog biscuits when the Princess of Wales returned basically to the public eye for trooping the color? You can't make this up. This woman has no vision. Her vision is clouded by her obsession with herself, but more importantly, her obsession with outshining whom she considers to be her rivals, her arch nemeses. In this instance, the royal family. So everything she does, in my opinion, is a reaction to them, as opposed to a carefully thought out and executed plan. The Oprah interview. That was a vitriolic, vindictive hit piece, if there ever was one. And it was done, coincidentally, after the expiration of the 12-month review period that the Queen had given them. My guess is they went back to her and said, "Are you going to give us what we want?" And she said, "Nope, same terms still stand. You're free to come back if you are happy to abide by these terms. Otherwise, you stay where you are." And we know that's what ended up happening. And boom, the Oprah interview. If Megxit was pre-planned, if this was what Meghan wanted all along, why would they have set up such a disparaging and vitriolic, defamatory session, basically, against her in-laws and even against her own family? She dragged her father and her sister through the mud in that interview. But point being, it seemed like a retaliatory, hissy fit, a reaction, as opposed to an intended, pre-planned sit-down interview. Now, for anyone who's read Tom Bower's Revenge, you would know that it is a very credible source of information. He hasn't been sued, and he's been very meticulous with researching most of his facts. He got a few little things wrong, like the dress that she wore for her engagement photo call and how much it cost, and et cetera, et cetera. But the main premise of his book and the main allegations and claims he's put in there have stood the test of time. And when it comes to vexatious litigants such as Meghan and Harry, that really says a lot. And so in his book, he put forth the theory, maybe the fact, I don't know, that when they left for Canada in 2019, it was a hissy fit because the royal family or the palace staff refused to support them in Meghan's lawsuit against the Daily Mail, if you remember, for violating her privacy and her copyright by reprinting segments of her letter to her father. While they were there, they still had every intention of coming back after the holidays. They were just punishing the royal family by taking away Archie and depriving them of their brand new grandchild / great-grandchild. While they were watching the Queen's message for Christmas of 2019, they noticed that their photo wasn't there on her desk. She only displayed the photos of the direct heirs in the line of succession. And according to Tom Bower, that was the moment that they flipped and they went, "That's it, we're gonna make these demands and they're gonna have to accept them because we're too valuable." Only to have the Queen call their bluff and, in an ultimate boss move, Queen move, go ahead. I'm not gonna give you what you want. You either stay here and fall in line, literally, because of, the whole hierarchy thing, or sayonara. What I can only imagine is that Meghan felt that she was pushed into a corner because the queen called her bluff, and she went, oh, I didn't expect things to go this way. I thought she was going to give me what I wanted because I'm so used to everyone giving me what I wanted. And it's true to a certain extent. The palace bent over backwards until a certain point to make her happy. And so when that didn't happen, she was confronted. She was shocked, didn't know what to do, and probably thought she had no choice but to actually leave the royal family. So in a way, it really could be that her hand was forced to leave rather than being kicked out like some people believe. No, I think she did this to herself. She believed she had no other option but to save face and leave. Of course, her delusions of grandeur played into that decision. She really thought she was going to be a global star and she was going to overshadow Catherine and everyone else. And we all know exactly how that ended up, don't we? And finally, based on their pseudo or fake royal tours that they've actually been running now for 3 years. I remember the first one was their fake, tour of New York back in 2021. And of course, we have the more recent ones with Nigeria and Colombia. Why would they be staging these fake royal tours if they didn't want to be doing them in the first place when they were senior working royals? Back in Australia in 2018, Meghan complained about not getting paid. She said, I can't believe I'm not getting paid for this. But she didn't say, I can't believe I have to do this at all. So I think what she expected was, aside from the millions of pounds that she was given an allowance to spend on her wardrobe, she expected compensation for her hard work, for walking around and shaking adoring fans' hands. So I don't believe that they had any issues with the royal lifestyle. Based on everything I've just gone through, and it was really helpful to go through these points even for me, because sometimes, prior to this, I didn't really know exactly where I stood on that question of, was MEGXIT pre-planned or was it an impulsive hissy fit? Now that I've sorted through my thoughts and listed them, I really do believe that this is all a case study in failure, in impulsivity. A cautionary tale of this is what happens when you are an impulsive creature, when everything you do is reactionary, when you don't stop to think things through. And perhaps we're trying to assign meaning to something that is utterly devoid of it. When we say, oh, she planned this from the get-go. Oh, she went there and knew exactly where she was going after that. I don't know. I really don't think so. I can't say for certain, obviously, but the evidence points to a different conclusion. So let me know what you think. Let me know if I've convinced you of changing your mind, if you believe that this was all meticulously thought out, or whether you, like me, lean more towards the, nah, she's an impulsive mess. I'm gonna end it here and get back to working on the royal history video. It does include Meghan in a way and how she squandered her position. So if that's what you're interested in, then do make sure to tune in. Hopefully I'll have it ready by next week. And we'll see you in the podcast on Monday, because as you all may already know, King Charles and Queen Camilla are touching down here in the land down under. So yeah, we'll see you then. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye. Sinceramente